Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Thursday, October 24th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Coming up, a new report looks at the numerous agencies overseeing the bird flu outbreak in dairy cows. Some say the U.S. as a whole needs a more unified response.
Many of the people that I spoke to feel like we're really going to need a form of nationwide surveillance.
Hear more details in just a few minutes, but first, today's headlines. After former Valley Congressman Devin Nunes left office, he went to work for Trump Media as CEO. But lately, news reports have surfaced about internal friction within the company. KVPR's Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado reports.
The New York Times and ProPublica have both reported on internal pushback to the leadership at Trump Media. At the center is an internal whistleblower complaint calling for Nunes to be fired. Without providing specific examples, the complaint reviewed by ProPublica alleges Nunes has, quote, severely mismanaged the company. Top executives have also been pushed out from the company in recent weeks. Neither Nunes nor the Trump campaign have responded to questions from the publication. Nunes, a dairy farmer originally from Tulare, served in Congress for nearly 2 decades, representing the San Joaquin Valley as a Republican. Before he left office, he filed multiple lawsuits against media companies over their own reporting on him. For KVPR News, I'm Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado.
Early voting across the U.S. is breaking records, and the San Joaquin Valley is following suit. With less than 2 weeks to go before the November election, nearly 13% of Fresno County voters have returned a ballot. The figure was reported by the Fresno Bee. County election officials expect that number to increase significantly by Election Day. The Merced Focus newsroom, meanwhile, reports that voting in that part of the valley is also up. As of this week, 7,600 ballots in Merced County have been returned. Immigrants' rights groups are warning that a proposition on November's ballot could lead to a rise in deportations. Proposition 36 is a tough-on-crime measure that would reclassify certain misdemeanor drug and theft cases as felonies. CalMatters reports simple drug charges in immigration court, for example, are considered aggravated felonies. That typically triggers the most severe penalties for immigrants, such as deportation. Immigrants' rights groups warn this could affect not only undocumented immigrants, but also green card holders and refugees. Governor Gavin Newsom has signed 2 bills to strengthen restrictions on flavored tobacco products. Advocates say they'll help local authorities reduce youth access and ensure compliance with current flavored tobacco bans. Tony Rodriguez from our California newsroom partner Cap Radio has more.
One law clarifies how tobacco sales enforcement should be carried out. Retailers will have their license to sell tobacco suspended or revoked for violating the flavor ban more than 3 times. Ellen Brickey, who works with Sacramento Breathe, a nonprofit focused on lung health and tobacco prevention, says guidelines make enforcement more effective.
Outlining clear enforcement policies and clear consequences for violations definitely helps. It also helps make the enforcement a lot easier on the enforcement agencies' end. If it's not as vague in the language, they know exactly what they're able to do, and it's easier for them to do that.
The other new law requires the state attorney general's office to create a list of unflavored tobacco products by the end of 2025.
Anything that is not on that list cannot be sold in California. So that should eliminate the issue of retailers saying, well, my distributor said it's fine, but the county health department is saying it's not. It'll be one list that every retailer in the state has, and there's not really any room for back and forth on that.
The updated regulations come as Sacramento and other regions continue to battle the influence of flavored tobacco products, which critics say are designed to appeal to young people. In Sacramento, I'm Tony Rodriguez.
It's Cartober here at KVPR. This month we're raising awareness about vehicle donations and how they benefit nonprofits like this one. Help support the public radio programs you rely on when you donate your used car, truck, RV, or boat. Schedule your free pickup today and we'll tow away that old vehicle and give you a receipt for your taxes. Visit kvpr.org/cars to get started.
And now to our main story. It was March 25th when the U.S. Department of Agriculture announced it had identified the avian influenza strain, H5N1, in Texas dairy cows. It was the first ever known transmission of what's commonly known as bird flu among cows. Nearly 7 months later, the virus has spread to dairy cows in 14 states, including here in California.
This is definitely one of the biggest challenges we've ever faced in California as far as the dairy industry goes.
And that's Anya Rodabaugh speaking with KVPR earlier this month. She's CEO of Western United Dairies, a trade group representing most California dairy farms. The latest count shows 131 dairy herds in California are infected with bird flu. Most of them are in the Central Valley. But aside from cattle, humans are also catching the virus. At least 15 human cases are confirmed in California alone, with most of them, again, in the Central Valley. Throughout this outbreak, there hasn't been a singular agency dictating what should be done, but rather numerous state and federal agencies. New reporting from Vanity Fair shows they've not all been unified in their response. Vanity Fair magazine's Katherine Eban highlighted this in her new piece. She joined me to discuss the response to the bird flu outbreak.
One of the things that my story goes into detail about is the USDA's dual mandate, which is it oversees agricultural trade and trade agreements that we have for exporting cheese, milk, and ice cream, cows, beef, poultry, but also the health and safety of the livestock in the country. Then you've got the FDA that regulates milk, and the CDC, which is overseeing human infections. So, everybody's got a different piece of this, and then you've got the states where they have primacy on public health issues within their states. So it is a whole lot to bring together, not to mention which you have the sort of interspecies nature of the outbreak. So as someone in the federal government told me, this is not COVID 2.0. It's really complicated and different.
Now that the virus has been testing positive in humans, how have these federal agencies responded? That seems like another level of concern.
Well, again, there you have the challenge of the federal versus state response. So there is a case that people are watching very closely in Missouri of a patient who was admitted to the hospital for all sorts of other health issues, who then tested positive for H5N1 without having had any known exposure to susceptible animals. And now it turns out there were a number of healthcare workers who treated that patient who also had ended up with similar symptoms, who were not tested at the time. Now, the CDC is volunteering in each case to provide support to different states. Missouri has not asked for help or assistance from the CDC. And, this becomes sort of tied up in red state, blue state politics. As the agriculture commissioner from Texas said to me, we didn't want any of those CDC employees on our farms. It was going to wind up like Clive Bundy, with an armed standoff. So there are, widely divergent attitudes towards public health officials in these different states.
Katherine, for your story, you spoke to about 55 people. This is a very in-depth report. Out of all of those people, was there a particular source or type of source that really illuminated this issue for you?
Yes. I spoke with a number of rural veterinarians, and I was really struck by what they are up against. They are under tremendous pressure because one of the things we describe is the consolidation of the dairy industry. There are these dairy processors that are kind of sit on top of these mega farms and control regional sales of milk. And the dairy farmers are terrified that they will be blocked from selling their milk in this very consolidated market. As a result, they're very reluctant to test because they're afraid they're going to be identified as having an infected farm. So they're putting, and all that pressure is rolling down to rural veterinarians who are responding and have sworn an oath to protect animal and human health and feel that testing is essential. And some of them have been fired. Some of them feel they have lost it all to try to do the right thing. So I was incredibly struck by their plight. And they didn't want their names used. They've lost jobs, they've lost livelihoods, and they feel they're up against a big political machinery, which I think is fair. I think they are.
So where do we go from here?
Well, many of the people that I spoke to feel like we're really going to need a form of nationwide surveillance. Instead of making testing optional, you really need comprehensive testing so that we can see where this disease is. And I think we all remember from COVID, the moment when, and I cited in my article, the moment when Donald Trump said, oh, I don't want those passengers on that cruise ship to come dock and come out onto U.S. land because then we'll have to test them. And I don't want those numbers. I don't want those case counts. And I think it's fair to say that just not wanting to know is not a really effective means of disease control. And so many people feel we're really not going to get a hold of this outbreak until we turn on the Klieg lights, mandated nationwide testing. But, as we know, there are political repercussions to those kinds of mandates. And I think nobody really wants to be the person to require it.
That was my conversation with Vanity Fair magazine reporter Katherine Eban. Keep up with KVPR News as we continue to bring you the latest information on the bird flu in the Central Valley. And that does it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.